Hi again. My name is Kim, and we are here for the canning class today. And I'm here with Mary Keith, and we're going to get started. But please go ahead and mute your microphone, and we also don't need your video. But if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we will answer the questions if we can at the time. But we're going to save a lot of the questions to the end. So thank you for coming.
Ready to go. All right. So yes, I'm Mary Keith. I'm retired from University of Florida Extension, and I was teaching this for many years before I retired, and I'm delighted to be back and teaching again. Today what we're going to be making is spiced blueberry jam, and I want to start with going through some of the equipment that you need. A canner. Everybody worries about, oh, do I have to go find one of these big old fashioned canners? No, they work fine. You won't necessarily need one that's quite that big for most batches of jam. Any kind of kettle that is deep enough to put your jars on a rack. You have to have a rack. You don't want your glass jars sitting flat on the metal bottom. So this rack I found for $1/4 of the Salvation Army. It fits perfectly in this kettle, but it's not deep enough. And so I just have a bunch of old jar rings in here to raise the rack up. So the kettle has to be deep enough to put the jars on a rack, 2 inches of water over the top, and some space to boil. So this kettle works fine for my pint jars. It would also work for my little, my half-pint jars. It would also work for the little 1/4 pint jars if you want to use those for, they make wonderful, cute little Christmas presents. But this is not deep enough to use for a pint jar. So I can't use this for fruit. So that's the kettle. And Kim, by the way, will be emailing you these posters, so you don't have to worry about trying to write everything down. The other thing in terms of a kettle is it has to be big enough this way that you can put all your jars in without them touching each other or the sides of the kettle. So this kettle works for a 6 or 7 jar batch of jam. Some recipes make 8 or 10 or 12 jars of jam. This kettle wouldn't work. You'd have to use one of the bigger ones. So that's the kettle. Any will do as long as you've got a rack. A lid definitely helps, and it's big enough, deep enough. Some of the other equipment that you really ought to try to find to get. Jar funnel. It's so much easier to fill your jars with this. A jar lifter. It's special tongs that are made for lifting your jars in and out of the boiling water. You definitely want a timer. We're going to use the timer 3 different times in one batch. A ruler, or this little thing, little gadget, it's for measuring the headspace. So when we start filling jars, good directions will have a headspace, and you need to be able to measure your headspace. And if you have, this is a little magnet, and it is great for picking up the lids when we have to take them out of the warm water. So, and other than that, measuring cups, measuring spoons, big stir, that's the equipment that you need. Ingredient-wise, for jams and jellies, Sure Gel, Ball, and Ball makes their jam, their pectin in jars or in the little boxes. And Certo, this is the liquid pectin. These are the standards. There's also now a low sugar or sugar-free. The recipes are not necessarily interchangeable. The procedures between a powdered pectin and a liquid pectin are different. So read the directions, follow the instructions. And basically, that's it for the equipment. Kim, have any questions come in immediately on this?
No.
All right, let's move over to the other side then, and we'll take a look at the recipe and our ingredients. So, got 3 things going here. Fruit. Most jams, marmalades, preserves do much better if you mash the fruit rather than running it through a food processor. The reason is when you run your fruit through a food processor, it beats so much air into the jam, into the fruit, that you're going to have an awful lot of foam. And that foam is going to make your pretty pale yellow, orange marmalade turn brown really quickly. So you want to try to mash. See how much I need. You see, I have it mostly made here, just enough to finish off. The recipe calls for 4 cups of mashed blueberries. So I have most of it already mashed and ready to go. My little piece of ginger go. Here we go. So this is 4 cups of blueberries there. We are going to add the pectin now, and this is where the difference comes in. If you use the liquid pectin, you put the sugar in first. If you use powdered pectin, you put the pectin in first. We're going to heat this up to boiling and let that pectin get completely dissolved and fully hydrated. If you do it the wrong way around and you put the sugar in first with a powdered pectin, you're going to end up with syrup, pancake syrup. It won't gel. Now, what we're doing to make this a little bit special, the standard blueberry jam is blueberries, sugar, pectin. We're going to make it gingered. So I already have some of the ginger grated here. I'm using about a 1-inch knob for 1 batch. You can also, if you want, put cinnamon or nutmeg. The cinnamon blueberry used to be my favorite until I decided to try the ginger, and now the ginger is definitely my favorite. You can add spices. That is not going to change the acidity. And you will notice when you look at the directions in the box. So this is the directions that come with the Shore Gel box, and it will tell you how much fruit, how much sugar for a batch. Some recipes call for lemon juice. You can't leave the lemon juice out because not all fruit has enough acid to gel. And for something to gel, you have to have the right balance of how much sugar, how much pectin, and how much acid. So it just so happens that blueberries have enough acid on their own. This is about a 1-inch knob of ginger. We're going to add that. Oops, I just threw some blueberries into the sugar. It's all right, they're going in a minute anyway. Okay, so we'll stir this in and we're going to take it over and get it cooking. Bring the sugar along, and this is pre-measured. You always want to measure your sugar out first, because when you go to put it in, yes, get right up in there and take a look. I'm going to try to make sure I have no lumps of still floating around in there. We want to get that pectin completely dissolved. Mixed, or let this come up to a full boil, and then once it hits a full boil, we'll dump all the sugar in at once. You don't want to be measuring the sugar one at a time. You just dump it all in. So I have here the lids. These lids are sitting in warm water, hot water. Read the directions on the box when you open either your whole box that has the jars and lids together or just a separate one. It used to be that we had to boil the lids first. Now, what the directions say for most of them is turn the heat off, and just to do here is soften up the gasket compound. So this red line is the gasket compound, and that is what we want to soften, so that when we put it on the jar, it's going to be ready to wrap down around and seal tightly on the top of the jar. In here, I have my pre-sterilized jars. So I put them in this morning. They boiled for 10 minutes. Said any recipe that calls for less than 10 minutes of the filled jars getting processed, you want to pre-sterilize. So that's basically your jams, your jellies, your pickles, marmalades, chutneys, conserves, a few pickles, not all, but most of them. Most of the pickles go for more than 10 minutes. But so these jars have already been boiled for their 10 minutes. So they're pre-sterilized. They're just going to sit in that hot water until this is ready to go. Kim, do we have any questions coming in?
Not at this time.
All right. So this just needs to heat. You do want to stir it, and you'll notice I'm using a flat-ended spatula. I have various of them. This is better because this way I can scrape the bottom of the kettle and I can get into the corners. Fruit in a good kettle, and especially when you put a lot of sugar in it, it'll burn, it'll stick very rapidly.
I have a couple questions. I didn't see them.
Okay.
One of it is a citric acid acceptable?
Instead of lemon juice?
I would imagine it didn't specify.
Yeah. Yes, but you would need to find the right conversion, and I don't have that off the top of my head. I should say with the lemon juice, if you're using lemon juice, bottled lemon juice is preferable to going out and picking your own lemon, because lemons can vary in their acidity. So a lemon that was up on the top of the tree and a lot of sun, and a lemon that was down in the middle in the shade could have different acidity, and the bottled lemon juice is standardized.
And then it says a powdered citric acid. Is that the same?
Well, that's how you buy it as a powder. It's mostly used for keeping fruit bright, keeping pears, for example, from darkening. Okay, so this is boiling. I will have to look that up, and Kim, get her phone number and I can, or her email, and we can send her that information. So this is just about up to a boil, because I don't have that conversion in my head. Pot never boils. Now that it's going to. All right, here we go. 4 cups of sugar dumped in directly. Stir like crazy. Get it all dissolved. Keep the kettle on high. And now is when we have our, we have our timer set. So I have the timer set to 1 minute because once this gets up to a full boil, we're gonna let it boil for exactly 1 minute. So if you have a watch that has a second hand on it, something like that, you can do that. So I have the timer ready, but I don't have it turned on yet. This has to get up to a full boil. And I do want to mention, you might wonder, especially since our poor camera person has to look down into this kettle, why am I using such a deep kettle? You always want to use a kettle that's at least 3 times deeper. So my fruit goes up to about here. You want at least that much extra because when this starts boiling, it will rise up. It will boil up. And especially if you're going to try making your own marmalades where you're just slicing up your lemons or your oranges or your grapefruits and making your own, that is really going to boil up too. So you always want to use a deeper kettle. A shallow pan might look like it's enough, but you'll have a boiled over mess on your stove. And let me just turn the heat back up. So this boiled. My jar's boiled already. But we're going to get this water back up to a boil. It's very, very hot still. But as soon as this boils for the 1 minute, we'll take it off the heat, we'll fill the jars, and we want to put those boiling hot jars right into boiling water. This jelly, when it's at a full boil, is about 220 degrees. So you don't want to be putting hot jam in cold jars or hot jars in cold water. All right, we're almost up to a boil here. Kim, any more questions?
Yes, I was gonna answer this one, but I wanted to make sure that you told them the correct answer to make sure. The sugar substitute, they're asking about can you use sugar substitute? And I think the answer is no, but I'm not sure why.
Correct. Sugar substitutes. Jams and jellies with powdered pectin, you really need to use plain white sugar. For any of the regular. Okay, I'm going to hit start on the timer, 1 minute. This is boiling. And we're going to keep stirring. Regular pectins will not gel with sugar substitutes. You can use the reduced sugar jam or the reduced sugar pectin. So Sure-Gel makes a Sure-Gel White. Ball makes a low sugar, no sugar, and it depends on the fruit whether you have to add at least a little bit of sugar. And even with the regular pectins, you can't just reduce the sugar. If you reduce the sugar, it's not going to gel. And honey, corn syrup, agave syrup, brown sugar, those are not going to make a good set jelly or jam either because it won't interact correctly. All right, timer, there's our 1 minute. So we'll set this aside, get it off the heat, and I'm going to switch over to this side and pull my hot jars out. So these have already been boiled for the 10 minutes, so they're pre-sterilized. Now the package says that this recipe makes 6 pints. I always put a 7th in, unless I have made this recipe many, many times. So we're going to leave that boiling. What I want to do is take a look here. If there's a lot of foam, And blueberries generally don't make a whole lot of foam. But if there's a lot of foam, you want to try, you get that? Try to scrape some of that off, because the foam is air. You don't want a whole lot of air in your jars, because that's going to make the jam or the jelly turn dark. So we'll now fill the jars. You can use a ladle if you want. I happen to prefer a little measuring cup. And for jams, jellies, marmalades, stuff like this, it's already had the living daylights boiled out of it. The Headspace recommendation for the jar, how much air, how much space we allow at the top of the jar, is just 1/4 of an inch. So we don't need a whole lot of space there. You always want to look at your directions. Most fruits require 1/2 inch. A lot of vegetables require 1 inch of space left in the jar. Some meat and some fish actually have 1.5 inches. And that depends on how much that food is going to expand and how much air is left in the food when it goes into the jar. So get our jars filled here. It is okay, and I know that that it's recommended in some of the directions. I will say that, having been a judge at many state and county fairs, when you open that jar, you can tell almost immediately who used the butter or the margarine, because it's sitting on top of really hot jam. Yeah, we need to turn both of these off. Thank you. It's sitting on top of really hot jam, and then it gets boiled. And I think it often comes out with a cooked oil, an old oil flavor. All right, so this recipe was pretty good. We have 6. The next step is we need to wipe the rims. Even though I used the funnel, it's quite possible that there's some jam up there, a bit of fruit. For something that's sweet, I'm going to use a damp cloth or a damp paper towel. So I want to wipe the tops, make sure that they are clean, so that when I put those lids on, there's not going to be, see how much jam was on there already? So I'm going to wipe all of these. Now we'll get the lids. So these are the flats. And this is where the little magnet thing comes in handy. Ouch, those are warm. So that preheating was not to sterilize, so I don't care that that just lit on the stove again. The preheating was just to soften this gasket compound so that it will stick. All right, I need to step past you one more time and grab the rebands. So what I like to do is I just zip them on lightly, really quickly, so that if I happen to knock one over, I don't have a major the whole way across the kitchen mess. All right, so that's getting them on. Oh, I did not use the ruler here, but this is where I would use a ruler down here to check the headspace. So 1/4 of an inch on this particular funnel, the bottom, if I go the whole way to the bottom edge on that funnel, that's a 1/2 inch. So I can pretty well eyeball what half that distance is. And that's how much I was filling those jars. But certainly at the beginning, you do want to use a ruler of some sort or that little notched instrument to check your head. Now, how tight do we have to turn? Is 3 fingers snug, then drop your hand and give it an additional 1/4 of a turn. So 3 fingers snug, drop your hand, 1/4 of a turn. That's all the tighter that it needs to be on. You don't want to really crank them down super tight because the air that's in there has to get out. The air is what's going to, chasing that air out is what's going to create the vacuum that will seal your jar. All right, so set the jars in. And again, we are going to make sure when we put them in that they are not touching each other or touching the sides of the canner. So you just want to space them out. Now this kettle, this is one of my stock pots, but I have a rack that fits it. I have it sitting on jar lids. It's got plenty of space. You see, I could put an additional 3 or 4, 5 jars in there. So it's not quite at a full boil yet, but we're going to reset the timer for 5 minutes. And as soon as this gets to that full boil, we'll start the timer and let it boil for just 5 minutes. So once to time the 10-minute pre-sterilization, once to time the 1-minute boil, and the third time now to time the processing. This procedure is called the processing. Okay, Kim, any questions?
Yeah, I had a question earlier too. It said that some recipes ask for apple cider vinegar, but they use that and it causes it to be runny. What does the apple cider vinegar do?
What that is doing is instead of the lemon juice, that's trying to add the acidity. So vinegar, cider vinegar, regular vinegar is not as acidic as the lemon juice is. So if you have a recipe that calls for, say, 4 tablespoons of vinegar, try it with 2 tablespoons of lemon juice and use the bottled lemon juice. Use the real lemon or something like that, because the lemon juice is nice and fruity. Aha, full boil. We'll hit start on the timer. The lemon juice adds enough acidity, but with half the amount of liquid in it. So
Someone missed, we went blank for a moment on the video. They wanted you to demonstrate the tightening of the lid again.
aha, very good. Thank you for bringing the pieces up. Yes, so what you do is once you have your jar filled, you have the top white, you put your warm lid on, you put it down, 3 fingers snug, so 2 fingers and a thumb, just nicely snug. Drop your hand and give it about another more that it needs. If you tighten it too much, the air won't be able to get out. You won't end up with a good tight seal on it. especially ours, where it was an elderly woman. She had her grandson come in and he cranked those lids down so tight the air couldn't get out. It actually warped the metal. There was so much pressure in there. So just 3 fingers snug and another quarter turn, okay? Back to the question about the reduced sugar. Like I said, there's a Sure Gel Light, Ball Light, and some places you can find Mrs. Wages. That's another brand that makes both regular pectin and the low sugar, reduced sugar pectin. And then there's another brand called Pomona that I have not seen for sale here, but you can order it online, that does not require any sugar at all. So you can just gel, plain old juice, whatever. But it requires calcium to gel. So what the sugar and the acid are doing is there's 2 pectins that have to attach to 2 sugars. The 2 sugars have to attach to an acid to make that bridge, to get it to set, to get it to gel. And the Pomona pectin just uses a calcium in there to get the 2 of them together. So when you buy that one, it comes with a package of pectin and a package of calcium. You dissolve the calcium in water and you put so many tablespoons of calcium water in with your fruit. That's another option. Now, what you can do with the low sugar, the reduced sugar. So if the recipe in the box, the directions in the box say no sugar is needed, and you try it and it's not quite sweet enough for you, you can put a little bit of one of the heat stable sweeteners in there to sweeten it up a little bit. That's just adding flavor. It's not going to affect the pectin. But if the recipe says you must use a 1/2 cup of pectin, a 1/2 cup of sugar, you do have to put the sugar in, because otherwise it's not going to gel. Now, one other thing to remember with the low sugar, the sugar is the preservative. The sugar in this is what is keeping it from spoiling. It's what is keeping it from getting dark. So if you make a no sugar or a really low sugar jam or jelly, it's going to get dark a lot faster. When I first moved to Florida, February, March, end of strawberry season, hallelujah, look how cheap these strawberries are. And I made batches and batches of low sugar, no sugar strawberry jam, because I have relatives who are diabetic. Come November, December, I'm getting them out. I'm gonna wrap them up and send them off as Christmas presents, and every single one of them ended up in the compost pile, because by then they were brown. They had just lost all their color. So if you want to make the sugar-free, freeze your fruit when it's cheap, make 1 batch that's only going to be 4, 5, 6 jars. You can keep those jars in the fridge or keep them in a cool, dark cupboard. Eat them all, and when you're down to the last jar, pull 1 more bag of fruit out of the freezer, make 1 more batch, rather than trying to do 6 batches or 8 batches right now while the fruit is cheap. Freeze most of it and just make it 1 at a time. And that way you'll still have the good, pretty color for it.
I have a question about the tightening of the lid. When we pull them out of the boiling water, we don't tighten them again, right?
Exactly. We're going to do that right now because the timer just went off. So there's our 5 minutes boiling. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take them straight up, straight over, sit them straight down. And this is something that took me a long time, because my habit from my years and years of canning was pick it up and tilt it to tilt that water off the top of the jar. And what the research has told us, the people up at the University of Georgia that have the National Center for Home Food Preservation, they found that by tilting the jar first, what I'm doing is I am putting hot runny jam or tomato juice or pickle acid or whatever I'm making but I'm pouring that hot jam right up against the underside here and jar that is not yet fully sealed. You were much more likely to. So we take them out and we're just going to leave them sit. You want to put them on cloth or wooden cutting board would work. But if you set them right on a cold or certainly on a metal tray, be cool. So if you do it at 8 o'clock in the morning, then you take the ribbons off. Now we're going to step here and pretend that, but as they cool, the lid will pop down. You'll hear it ping. What we're going to do is we're going to take the ring bands off now. So we're going to take all of these off. And sometimes you will find that they are pretty tight because when I wiped the top, I didn't wipe out here. So in some of these, I can feel that it's sticky around the sides. Now, if I leave that ring band on and there's a little bit of jam, a little bit of fruit there, and it stays moist, what I have is a dark, damp, warm, covered place, and it's a great place to grow mold. So I will take my damp cloth or my damp paper towel. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe the edges, wipe the outside of the jars to get rid of any of that leftover jam, jelly, whatever that might be there. So we'll wipe them. You can see what some of these, I didn't have quite enough to make a full, so some of them have a little bit too much headspace, but you can see how nice and firm that is. It's holding its shape, it's not running. So that's a good quality jam. I did that one, we'll do it again. So now, these jars are ready to be stored. I can wash the rings and use them again or just set them aside, but I'm going to store these jars someplace cool, preferably dark. So cool and dark, I mean, which means, you know, not out in the carport, not sitting right beside the water heater, something like that. And these jars will keep for years. Before then, you know, within 4 or 5 years, you would want to have these consumed. Let's shift over here, and I want to show you a couple of things. So these are some samples now. These are jars that I've made in the past. At this point, I would want to label them, so you can put the label on the top. So these are, not sure what all kinds I have here. These are dissolvable labels. So these you can find, they come in a roll and you can put them on the side or you can put them on the top. You can also, if you want, just write the name and the date on the jar. The flat, this piece, is what you can't reuse. So this you can write on, do whatever you want. If you're doing them for Christmas presents, one of the things you can do, save some of your old Christmas presents, Christmas cards, cut out the design, the prettiest part of the design, and you can put that on. Then if you want to give that as a Christmas present, cloth, probably a good idea to put the ring bands back on. just so the person who's getting them has a band to hold the lids on. But these then are labeled, ready to store, over and done. So that is a super quick rush through making ginger blueberry jam. Questions coming in?
Yeah, so
Good.
when you did the blueberry with the pectin, and after it settled in, did you add the ginger after that?
No, I put the ginger in right along with the pectin.
I'm going to use lemon because the lemon and really
If the recipe calls for lemon juice, then you would put the lemon juice in right there along with the pectin. I would, if you're going to try to make a blueberry lemon, and you're just going to put lemon zest, grated lemon zest into it, then yes, add the lemon zest right then. I would be leery of trying to put a whole lemon, a sliced up lemon in, because that would be so much acidity that the pectin might not set. You might end up with a soft, more like a syrup with that much acidity. But yes, you could just put lemon zest in. If you wanted to put nutmeg or cinnamon or something like that, add it when you add the pectin so that it's boiling and the flavor gets infused the whole way through.
Okay. And then it says, so each jar does not have to be completely 1/4 space. So you can do them under that and still can it fine?
Yes, you can. Let me show you, since it's sitting right here. So this was about 3/4 of a jar that I had left when I made this previous batch. I went ahead and canned it, but because it has that much extra headspace, this will darken faster with that much air left in. As long as there's enough fruit in it to keep it from floating, you can go ahead and can it. But then put that one right at the front. So that's the one that you use first, because that's going to be the poorer quality product. If you're going to make a mistake on headspace, put too much headspace. If you don't put enough headspace, the food can push up as it expands in the heat. It'll push up against the lid. It can lift the lid off so the lid doesn't seal, or it can push up and ooze out under the lid. And again, the jar won't seal. So too much headspace is safer than too little headspace.
All right. And then I think I saw another one. Let's see. I don't know where we did freeze at a point, and they said that we froze during the time that you were cooling and taking the rings off. So I guess the process, for how long from cooling to removing the rings?
24 hours, or until the jars are absolutely completely cool. So generally, I make them one day and just leave them sit until the next day, leave them sit overnight. But if you're making, if you're working at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, you might be able to take the rings off by 9 or 10 that evening. But the jars, you want them to be completely cool.
Okay, a lot of really good comments. Thank you for the information. They feel more comfortable now having this quick little lesson. So I will be, I know what I'm muted.
All right, let me add one other thing. References. This is the University of Georgia, so easy to preserve. It has canning, all the different canning, as well as a chapter on freezing and a chapter on drying. This you have to order from the university. And then the USDA, if you live in Central Florida in our vicinity, Kim has these books here. This is just canning. There's no freezing or drying. But both of these are your absolutely most reliable, best tested, safest recipes around. And University of Georgia also has a website, the National Center for Home Food Preservation. And I don't have it right off the top of my head what the whole web address is, but they have videos there, and they have lots and lots of good tested recipes there as well. And if you're in Florida, make some of this great stuff, save your best looking 3 jars, put them in the state fair, put them in the county fair, win some money for all of your hard work. They would love to have, ooh, ding, I just heard one ding. One of our jars just popped. Okay, Kim.
All right, so I just wanted to mention, thank you so much, Mary, for helping us with this today and showing people lots of really good information. We do have those great books for sale if you are interested in the books. I will be sending you the recipe. I'll be sending you the posters and any other pertinent information I might find useful, maybe some of the websites, things like that. So you will get everything that you need. Look in your inbox for a survey. If you would like to see another class similar to this, maybe we can talk Mary into doing another one. So let us know if you're interested in it and what you'd be interested in. What would you like to be canning? And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much. Thank you, Mary.
Happy canning.